My name is Jack, and I'm a passionate gamer. I've always found the idea of online horror games very intriguing, and when I discovered the game Slenderman Online, I couldn't resist the temptation to try it. It was a night like any other, and I was alone in my college dorm room. After installing the game, I started playing with excitement. The concept was simple. I had to explore a dark forest in search of 8 scattered pages while trying to escape from Slenderman, a faceless and terrifying creature. I had heard about the legends of Slenderman, but I thought they were just stories to scare people. I couldn't imagine how wrong I was. The game started innocently. I was in the midst of a dark forest, armed only with a handheld flashlight. My goal was to collect the 8 pages and escape from Slenderman. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the silent air, and the rustling of leaves created an eerie atmosphere. As I collected the pages, I began to sense a disturbing presence. I would turn my head and look behind me, but there was nothing there. However, the feeling of being watched continued to grow. It was as if something or someone was always one step behind me. Then, I saw it. A tall, slender figure appeared behind the trees, illuminated only by the dim light of my flashlight. It was him, Slenderman. His gray, smooth skin seemed to merge with the darkness of the forest. He had no face, just an unsettling void where his face should be. His arms were long and sinister, almost touching the ground. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned and tried to escape. Slenderman was following me, advancing with slow and relentless steps. My flashlight began to flicker, as if his presence was interfering with my light. I was overcome by panic and kept running, desperately searching for the missing pages. Throughout the game, I had read those unsettling pages, such as, "We watch you, and you can't escape." It was as if Slenderman had control over everything, including the virtual world of the game. His presence seemed to extend well beyond the game's boundaries, and I began to fear that he had found a way to follow me into the real world. That night, while I was in my college dorm room, paranoia had completely taken over me. I examined every dark corner, every shadow, searching for signs of Slenderman's presence. I had turned off the computer, but his presence still seemed to envelop me. Then, I saw him. He was there, in my room, with his long arms reaching towards me. I screamed in terror and tried to escape, but every door and window seemed sealed. There was no way out. As I desperately tried to flee, Slenderman was approaching slowly. His tall and sinister figure seemed closer and closer, and my mind was in the grip of panic. His impossibly long arms reached towards me like dark, menacing tentacles, unattainable and threatening. I tried to reach for my phone to call for help, but when I reached for the nightstand, I discovered that the phone had disappeared. It was as if Slenderman had the power to manipulate reality itself. I had the feeling that he was not only there for me, but that he was trying to erase every trace of my presence. Terror had completely overwhelmed me, and my body was paralyzed. I had no choice but to helplessly watch as Slenderman got closer and closer. His featureless face without eyes seemed to gaze into my soul, and I felt a sense of inevitability as his presence swallowed me. And then, my vision blurred. The world became a whirlwind of darkness, and I lost consciousness. I had been captured by Slenderman, and reality had distorted around me. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back in my college dorm room, as if nothing had ever happened. It was all over. I had returned to the real world, and Slenderman seemed to have disappeared. But my mind was in a state of complete confusion, and I had no idea what had truly happened. As I tried to piece together the fragments of my memories, I realized that I couldn't explain what I had experienced. It was as if the boundary between the game and reality had completely blurred, and my mind had undergone an experience I couldn't comprehend. Since that night, I've stopped playing Slenderman Online. I don't know if Slenderman was real or just a product of my imagination, but the fear of that experience has left deep scars. Now, I try to forget that terrible night, but the feeling of being ensnared by something dark continues to haunt me. My mind is a labyrinth of terror and confusion, and I've learned that some fears are so deep that they can't be defeated, only avoided. My name is Alex, and my life took a dark and terrifying turn when I discovered that I had become the invisible victim of Slenderman. It all began one summer evening when I was on a quiet walk in the park. I had never been superstitious, and I thought the stories about Slenderman were just urban legends to scare people. I never imagined how real they were. I was alone, lost in my thoughts as I walked among the trees. The sun was setting on the horizon and the shadows were growing longer. Then, suddenly, I felt a strange sensation, as if someone were watching me. I turned around, but there was no one there. I tried to shake off that feeling and continued walking, but the unease persisted. As I crossed a clearing, I noticed something odd. A sheet of paper, torn from a diary, was hanging on a tree. I approached and began to read it. It was filled with unsettling drawings of Slenderman and his victims. I thought it was a tasteless prank, but the feeling of being watched intensified. My heart started to beat faster as I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. From that moment on, my life changed irreversibly. Slenderman's appearances became more and more frequent. At first, he was just an indistinct shadow among the trees. But then his figure became clearer and more menacing. He was tall and slender, with gray, smooth skin. He had no face, just a dark void where his face should be. His arms were incredibly long, and it seemed like he could extend them endlessly. I felt powerless because no one else seemed to see Slenderman. I was trapped in a living nightmare. His appearances mostly occurred at night. I would wake up sweaty and terrified, knowing that Slenderman was there, in the darkness of my bedroom, watching me invisibly. I began to search for information about Slenderman, hoping to find a way to rid myself of this invisible curse. I read stories of other victims, people who had been pursued and driven to madness by this creature. But there was no obvious solution, no way to free myself from this dark presence. My life became increasingly isolated. I avoided friends and family, fearing that I might pass on my curse to them. I stopped working, and every day was a struggle for survival. My mind was collapsing under the weight of this constant and invisible presence. Then, one day, in my desperate search for a solution, I found an online group of people who had experienced similar encounters with Slenderman. This group believed that Slenderman's obsession could be confronted using religious elements and protective rituals. They were convinced that Slenderman was some sort of dark entity and could be kept at bay through faith and determination. I joined the group and began to explore this new perspective. The other members shared their experiences and the rituals they had adopted to confront Slenderman. They had in common the use of religious symbols like crucifixes, holy water, and sacred objects for protection. I bought a crucifix and started carrying it with me at all times. When I sensed Slenderman's presence or felt his obsession creeping in, I would grip the crucifix tightly and recite protective prayers. Along with the group, I also began to conduct purification rituals in the places where I had experienced Slenderman's alleged appearances. It was a way to cleanse those places of darkness and malevolent presence. Over time, I noticed that Slenderman's appearances became less frequent and less intense. It seemed that the use of religious elements and protective rituals was indeed having a positive impact on my experience. My faith and determination to defend myself were proving to be an effective deterrent against this dark entity. Finally, the day of the final confrontation with Slenderman arrived. I was in an isolated forest, the place where his appearances had been most frequent. I had the crucifix and sacred items with me, and I had prepared an exorcism ritual based on my faith and my determination to end this obsession once and for all. Slenderman appeared, his tall and sinewy figure emerging from the darkness among the trees. But this time, I didn't succumb to fear. I confronted his presence firmly, gripping the crucifix tightly and reciting protective prayers with determination. My voice echoed in the air, charged with faith and the intention to rid myself of him. I also sprayed holy water on him. Slenderman reacted with a deafening scream. His figure began to contort and fade. His impossibly long arms were retracting, and the darkness around him was slowly dissipating. I had won. When Slenderman finally dissolved into nothingness, I felt a sense of liberation that I had never thought possible. My mind was finally free from the obsession that had tormented me for so long. The forest seemed to come alive, bathed in the sunlight, and I felt at peace with myself. From that day on, my life changed. I continued to follow my faith and use determination to face life's challenges. My experience with Slenderman taught me that the human mind has incredible power, and that faith can be a stronghold against even the darkest fears. I proved that, even in the face of paranormal forces, inner strength and faith can be powerful weapons.